Today we're going to take a look at minestrone soup. My cat's right by the camera right now, so if it moves, it's because she's fucking around. Salsa! Okay, so we're making minestrone soup. Minestrone is just a hearty Italian vegetable soup that's made of onions, celery, carrots, tomatoes, and stock. You can also add things like beans and pasta. There's no set recipe for this, so you can really do whatever you want. We did all the heavy lifting for this soup in episode 3, making that broth. So everything's going to come together pretty quick today for us. One of the defining characteristics of minestrone is its deep tomato flavor. So I'm just going to take a sec to talk about tomatoes. So I'm using San Marzano tomatoes today. San Marzanos are kind of considered like the Cadillac of tomatoes. To be a true San Marzano, these guys have to be grown on volcanic soil near Naples under the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. So there's a pretty strict set of qualifications that these guys have to meet to actually be considered a true San Marzano. Unfortunately, both the name San Marzano and the DOP certification are not legally regulated in North America, so tomato producers can call their tomatoes San Marzanos and put a DOP stamp on it, even if they're not, and there's no legal consequence. So I read an article that estimates that nearly 95% of tomatoes sold in North America labeled San Marzano are actually fake. So it can be difficult trying to find a legit one. I'll show you a couple of things you can look for, but overall, honestly, I just go to the Italian Star Deli. Those guys, you know they're going to have real stuff, so go check them out. They'll have your tomatoes, and then you're not fucking around trying to wonder if your tomatoes that you're finding in like Safeway are legit. Okay, so a couple things real quick. So San Marzanos, like I said, need to be grown in Italy, so anything you see grown in the US or kind of anywhere else in the world are no good. The other thing, San Marzanos always sold as whole tomatoes, so anything diced, anything crushed, anything pureed, not legit. There's a couple other things we can look at here, and I'll come a little closer. Okay, so all San Marzanos sold will have these two certification seals on them. They can be faked, but it's a good thing to note. They also have, you can see here, their own independent certification number. So both these cans I have, both have these two seals, and they're labeled individually. So that's a good sign. So just take a look, and if the can is mostly in Italian, that's probably a good sign. But like I said, there are a lot of fakes going around. So if you want to be safe, go to the Italian Star Deli. And if you want to just go the grocery store route, don't bother with San Marzanos because you're going to get duped. Just grab some whole canned tomatoes and let's go with those. So that's it. We're done talking about tomatoes. We'll go and make this, and I'll show you how it's done. It's going to be quick. So the first thing we're going to do here is get these tomatoes pureed. I'm going to use a blender on the slowest setting. If you use a high speed, it's going to whip a bunch of air into the tomatoes and make them all foamy. A food mill also works great for this. Or, if you want, you can go a bit more rustic and use a potato masher and break those into chunks. You can even get right in there with your hands and break those up that way. The next thing we're going to do is get our onion, celery, and carrots prepped and sauteing on medium heat in some olive oil. The goal here is just to get everything chopped into the same size. You can see that these carrots I have are smaller at the bottom than they are at the top. So I'm going to halve the bottoms and chop them up, but quarter the tops. This will just help everything cook at the same rate. So we want to season this dish in layers here. Once we get all of our vegetables in the pot, I'm going to hit them with some kosher salt and fresh black pepper. I'm just going to let these go, stirring occasionally until the onions start to turn translucent. Then to really amp up the tomato flavor, I'm going to throw in a tablespoon or two of tomato paste once the veggies have softened up a bit. Tomato paste is great, but you really need to cook it out for a couple of minutes or else it'll give your dish a metallic flavor. So just saute this for like 3 to 5 minutes. While the tomato paste is cooking, I'm going to chop up some kale. I love adding some kale to this soup, so I wash this and I'm just going to give it a rough chop, then I'll gather it all together and run my knife through it a couple of times. I'm going to add my tomatoes before my broth. These tomatoes will really benefit from some salt, so I'll add those first and give them a pinch of kosher salt. If you don't like all the tomato action that's going on here, feel free to omit the tomato paste and the canned tomatoes and just add some more broth, then you have a bomb-ass vegetable soup instead of a minestrone. No big deal. Then I'm just going to come in with some of that broth we made the other day. You can see that this broth has a bit of body to it.
All that is the collagen from the bones that we were able to get out. So if your broth looks like this, that means we did it right. It'll all loosen up when it comes up to temperature. Right before this comes to a boil, I'm going to drop my kale and give that a stir. I'm going to add maybe like 2 cups of cold water here just to thin it out a bit, and then let that come back up to a gentle boil. Now we need to bring a bit of acid to the party, so I'm just going to throw in a splash of apple cider vinegar. I also like a bit of heat, so I'm also going to throw in a couple dashes of hot sauce. And then honestly, that's it. The soup is done whenever the veggies reach your preferred level of doneness. Personally, I like just a bit of bite to my carrots still. Now the next part is really important. If you want to add pasta to your minestrone, you need to ladle out however much you want to eat and cook the pasta in your soup in a separate pot. If you add your pasta right into this soup, those fucking noodles are going to soak up all the broth you spent 2 days trying to make. So portion out what you want to make, add your pasta, and your soup is done whenever your pasta is al dente. I like to top this with some Parmesan cheese, a drizzle of nice olive oil, and some chopped parsley.